I never thought I'd be sitting here, in a studio apartment that smells like stale coffee and regret, watching the highlights of a life that doesn't even feel like mine anymore. One day I was the golden boy of the league, signing a $50 million contract with a pen that probably costs more than my current car, and the next, I was looking at a bank balance that wouldn't even cover a decent dinner in Manhattan. I lost it all. The cars, the mansion, the respect, and the woman I thought was my soulmate. And the worst part is, I was the one who handed them the shovel to dig my grave. People ask me all the time how a professional athlete with a team of advisors can just wake up broke, and I used to blame the market or bad luck. But the truth is much more sinister than that. It was a calculated, slow-burn betrayal by the people I trusted most in this world. And by the time I realized the game was rigged, I had already been played off the court. Was I a fool for trusting my own family and the love of my life? Or would you have done the exact same thing if you were 22 with more money than sense? I really need you to listen to the details of this and tell me honestly, was there any way out of this trap, or was I destined to lose everything the moment I signed that dotted line? To understand how I hit rock bottom, you have to understand where I started. I grew up in a town where the only way out was a bus ticket or a scholarship, and I worked my tail off to make sure I got the latter. My mom worked 3 jobs just to keep me in sneakers that didn't have holes in them, and my older brother, Marcus, was the one who stayed late at the gym with me every single night, rebounding my shots until his arms were sore. We were a team. When you make it, we all make it. That was our motto. And man, did I make it. When the draft happened, it was like a fever dream. Suddenly, I wasn't just a kid from the neighborhood, I was a brand. I remember the first time I saw my jersey in a store window. I cried right there on the sidewalk. My first big purchase wasn't a Ferrari. It was a 5-bedroom house for my mom in the safest neighborhood I could find. I gave Marcus a job as my business manager, because I wanted him to share in the success. I didn't care that he didn't have a degree. I thought loyalty was worth more than an MBA. Then there was Vanessa. She was a rising model, stunningly beautiful, and she seemed to love me for me, not the jersey. We were the it couple. I spent millions on her, jewelry, trips to Paris on private jets, a custom engagement ring that could blind you if the sun hit it right. I felt invincible. My agent and my accountants would try to bring up budgeting or diversification, but Marcus would always dismiss them, saying they just wanted to control my money and take a bigger cut. I listened to him because he was my blood. I started pouring money into investments, he suggested. Nightclubs that never opened, tech startups that disappeared overnight, and luxury real estate in countries I couldn't find on a map. I was so busy with the season, with the pressure of performing under the bright lights, that I just signed whatever papers Marcus put in front of me. I thought I was building a legacy for my family. The lifestyle was intoxicating. When you're at that level, nobody ever says no to you. If I wanted a custom watch at 3 in the morning, Marcus would find a way to make it happen. If Vanessa wanted a weekend at a private island in the Maldives, the jet was fueled and ready before she finished her sentence. I remember one specific night in Miami. We were at this high-end club, and I must have spent $60,000 on bottle service for people I didn't even know. I looked over at Marcus, who was laughing and tossing stacks of cash like it was confetti, and for a split second, I felt a knot in my stomach. I asked him if we were doing okay, and he just slapped me on the back and said, "Bro, you're the king. The money is never going to stop. Don't be a buzzkill." That was the theme of my life for 3 years. Every time I tried to be responsible, I was made to feel like I was being cheap, or forgetting where I came from. Marcus used my guilt like a weapon. He'd remind me of how he worked those extra shifts at the warehouse, so I could travel to AAU tournaments. He'd remind me of the time he took a hit for me in a street fight when we were kids. He made me feel like my money wasn't mine, it was ours. And Vanessa played her part perfectly too. She'd tell me how proud she was of my generosity, all while showing me brochures for villas in Tuscany that she just happened to be looking at. I was being squeezed from both sides, and I was too blinded by the lights of the arena to see the shadows they were casting. I started ignoring the calls from my primary bank's fraud department. I started letting Marcus handle the passwords to my digital accounts. I even gave him power of attorney when I went on an international promotional tour because it made things easier for the bills. I was literally handing him the keys to my life and asking him to drive, never realizing he was heading straight for a cliff. As the months rolled by, the spending became more frantic. It wasn't just the nightclubs and the villas anymore. Marcus started talking about the foundation. He convinced me that we needed a charitable arm to cement my legacy in the community. On the surface, it looked great. We hosted basketball camps, gave away turkeys at Thanksgiving, and I was featured in local magazines as the hometown hero who never forgot his roots. But behind the scenes, Marcus was using the foundation as a clearinghouse. He was over-reporting expenses, hiring consultants, who were just his old buddies from the block, and pocketing the difference. I was so proud of the work I thought we were doing that I never bothered to look at the audit reports. I remember one afternoon, my actual financial advisor, a guy named David who had been with me since the draft, practically begged for a meeting. He told me that my burn rate was unsustainable. He told me that at the rate I was going, I'd be broke within 5 years of retiring. I laughed in his face. I told him he didn't understand the culture, and that I had enough coming in to cover anything. Marcus was standing right there, nodding along, calling David a suit, who only cared about his percentage. That was the moment I effectively fired David, the only person who was actually looking out for me. Without his oversight, the gates were wide open. Marcus started taking out bridge loans against my future earnings, claiming he was leveraging assets. In reality, he was digging a hole so deep that not even a Hall of Fame career could fill it. Vanessa's behavior changed too, though I was too enamored to see it for what it was. She became obsessed with her own brand. She used my money to hire a full-time content team, a stylist and a publicist. She wanted to be more than just an athlete's wife. She wanted to be a mogul. I admired her ambition. I didn't realize that every dollar she was investing in her career was being funneled into accounts that didn't have my name on them. She'd throw these massive galas, ostensibly for the foundation, but the guest list was always full of influencers and wealthy bachelors. I'd be at the facility, icing my knees after a back-to-back game, while she was out at 3 in the morning networking. When I'd bring up my fatigue or my worries about the team standings, she'd just tell me to focus on the game and leave the business of being famous to her and Marcus. I felt like a thoroughbred horse, well-fed, groomed, but only valuable as long as I could run fast. The pressure was immense. Every time I stepped on the court, I felt the weight of 40 people's salaries on my shoulders. My cousins, my old neighbors, Marcus's friends, everyone had their hand out, and I was too afraid of being called fake to say no. I was buying cars for people who had bullied me in high school just to prove I was real. I was paying for surgeries for relatives I hadn't seen in a decade. I was a god in my neighborhood, but I was a ghost in my own home. By my 4th year in the league, I was at the top of my game, but the cracks were starting to show in my personal life. Vanessa was getting distant unless I was buying her something, and Marcus was suddenly living a lifestyle that even my salary shouldn't have been able to support. He was wearing 6-figure watches and flying his friends out to Vegas every weekend on my dime. When I finally worked up the courage to ask him about the business accounts, he got defensive, accusing me of not trusting the man who helped me get to the top. He played on my guilt, reminding me of all those nights in the gym. So I backed off. I chose peace over my bank statement, and that was the biggest mistake of my life. I started getting these weird notices from the IRS, but Marcus told me it was just a paperwork error his team was handling. Meanwhile, Vanessa was pushing for a massive wedding, a multi-million-dollar event that would be televised. I was hesitant because for the first time, I felt a bit of financial strain, but she told me that if I loved her, I'd give her the day she deserved. I loved her, so I said yes. We spent 8 months planning this royal-level wedding. 2 weeks before the big day, I tore my ACL. It was a freak accident in practice. In an instant, my season was over. And because of the way my contract was structured with certain health milestones, a huge chunk of my upcoming guaranteed money was suddenly at risk. I wasn't worried though. I thought I had millions in the bank. I figured I'd take the year to recover, marry Vanessa and come back stronger. But when I went to wire the final payment for the wedding venue, the transaction was declined. I thought it was a bank error. I called my lead accountant, the one Marcus told me not to talk to, and what he told me turned my world gray. The accounts were nearly empty. Most of the money had been moved into an offshore holding company I didn't have access to, and the investments Marcus had made were actually just shells used to funnel cash into his own private accounts. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I sat in my hospital bed, my leg in a massive brace, staring at the ceiling and trying to make the math work in my head. $30 million. That's what was gone. It wasn't just spent on luxury, it was systematically drained. I tried calling Marcus, but he didn't pick up. I tried calling Vanessa, and she told me she was at a spa and couldn't talk. The loneliness was deafening. I started going through old emails and physical mail that Marcus had filed for me. I found letters from banks I didn't recognize, loan applications for properties I didn't own, and even credit cards opened in my name that were maxed out at various casinos. My own brother had turned my life into his personal ATM. And it wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal of the bond. I kept thinking about those nights in the gym. Was it all a long con? Did he only help me because he saw me as his lottery ticket? I spent 3 days in a dark room, refusing to talk to the coaches or the media. I felt like a failure. Not because I lost the money. I could make money again, but because I had been so easily manipulated by the people I loved. I realized that Marcus had been playing a game of psychological warfare. He kept me busy, kept me distracted with problems he created, so I wouldn't look at the real problem. Him. And Vanessa. I looked at the engagement ring on her finger in our photos and realized I hadn't just bought her a piece of jewelry. I had bought her silence and her participation in the scheme. I started to wonder if she even liked me, or if she was just the bait Marcus used to keep me happy while he picked my pockets. So that is the situation I was in. I was injured, my career was on the line, my bank accounts were drained by my own brother, and I had a wedding in 10 days that I couldn't pay for. I felt like the world was closing in on me, and I had no idea who I could actually trust. Before I tell you what happened when I confronted them and the absolute insanity that followed, I want you to pause right now and comment below. What would you do? If you found out your own flesh and blood had been stealing your hard-earned millions while you were out there risking your body on the court, would you call the cops? Or would you try to handle it quietly to save your family's reputation? And what about the fiancé? Tell me what your move would be in my shoes. I decided to play it cool for 48 hours. I needed to see how deep the rabbit hole went. I hired a private investigator with the last bit of cash I had hidden in a safe, and the results were gut-wrenching. It wasn't just Marcus. Vanessa knew everything. In fact, she and Marcus had been seeing each other behind my back for over a year. They were planning to wait until after the wedding, wait for the prenup to be finalized with a massive lifestyle clause, and then divorce me to take the rest. They were literally waiting for me to fail, so they could scavenge the remains. The PI showed me videos of them at a luxury condo I didn't even know I owned. They were laughing, drinking my expensive wine, and talking about the big payday. I felt like my heart had been ripped out and stomped on. I sat in my darkened living room for hours, looking at the photos of them together at a hotel in Miami, while I was away on a road trip. The rage I felt was unlike anything I've ever experienced, but I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I realized that if I wanted to survive this, I had to play the best game of my life. I called a meeting at my house. I told them I had a huge announcement regarding a new endorsement deal that would save our finances. I made it sound like I was getting a $20 million signing bonus from a major shoe brand. I watched their eyes light up with greed. They actually had the nerve to hug me and tell me how blessed we were. I spent the next 2 days preparing for the final buzzer. I gathered every bank statement, every forged signature, and every grainy photo the PI had taken. I realized that my mom was the only person who had no idea what was happening. She was still living in the house I bought her, blissfully unaware that her oldest son was a thief and her youngest was a target. I decided I wouldn't tell her until it was over. I didn't want her to have to choose between us. On the night of the confrontation, I didn't just invite Marcus and Vanessa. I invited the new lawyer I had secretly hired and a representative from the league's fraud division. I hid them in the library. When Marcus and Vanessa arrived, they were practically glowing. They thought they were about to get their hands on 20 million more. We sat at the long mahogany table I had paid $300,000 for. I looked at my brother. the man who taught me how to cross over, the man who I thought would have my back until the end. I saw the greed in his eyes, and it made me feel sick. I asked him one more time. Marcus, is there anything you want to tell me about the accounts? Anything at all? I'm about to sign this big deal, and I need to make sure everything is clean. He didn't even blink. He looked me straight in the eye and said, It's all good, little bro. I've handled everything. You just focus on getting that leg healthy. That was the final nail in the coffin. When they arrived for the dinner I'd arranged, they were dressed to the nines, ready to celebrate their next big haul. I sat them down in the dining room. The table was set beautifully, but instead of food, I had the documents from the investigator laid out face down on each of their plates. I started by thanking them for being my rock during my injury. I saw them exchange a look of triumph, thinking they still had me fooled. Vanessa even reached out to hold my hand, her eyes full of fake tears. I pulled my hand away and flipped the photos over. The silence in the room was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. The look on Marcus's face went from smug to ghostly white in a second. Vanessa's mouth dropped open, and the tears dried up instantly. I didn't say a word. I just let them stare at the evidence of their betrayal. Marcus tried to laugh it off at first, saying it was photoshopped, or a setup by my enemies. But when I played the audio recording of them discussing the divorce settlement, he stopped talking. Vanessa started screaming at him, trying to shift the blame, saying he forced her into it, that she was scared of him. It was the most pathetic performance I've ever seen. I told them that the police were already on their way, and that I had filed for an emergency injunction to freeze every single account associated with them. I watched as they realized their grand plan hadn't just failed. It had blown up in their faces. I kicked them out of my house that night, but the damage was done. The investments were gone. The house was heavily mortgaged without my knowledge, and the wedding was off. The media caught wind of the breakup, but not the theft. I was labeled as the diva athlete, who dumped his loyal girlfriend after an injury. My reputation took a massive hit, and because I couldn't play, no one wanted to sign me to a new deal. I had to sell everything, the cars, the jewelry, the big house, just to pay off the IRS and the debts Marcus had racked up in my name. The aftermath was a slow, painful grind. The criminal case against Marcus dragged on for months. He tried to claim that the money was gifts, and that he had my verbal authorization for every transaction. Because I had given him power of attorney and signed so many blank documents, the legal battle was a nightmare. I ended up having to settle just to get him out of my life forever. He didn't go to jail, but he was barred from ever working in financial management again. He moved back to our hometown, but he couldn't show his face. Everyone knew what he'd done. Vanessa tried to sue me for emotional distress, and a portion of the assets she claimed were hers. She didn't get a dime, but the legal fees ate up the last of my savings. I found myself in a position I hadn't been in since I was 15 years old. I was broke, I was hurt, and I had nobody to rely on but myself. I spent hours in that studio apartment, staring at my trophies, wondering if they were worth the price I had paid. I realized that my success had been a bubble, and Marcus and Vanessa were the ones who kept the air in it just so they could watch it pop when it suited them. But you know what? Being broke was the best thing that ever happened to my character. It stripped away the ego. It stripped away the fake friends. It left me with nothing but my work ethic. The following months were the hardest of my life. I went from having a security detail and a personal chef to eating canned tuna in a studio apartment. My friends disappeared the moment the bottle service stopped. My phone, which used to buzz every second, went completely silent. I spent my days in the gym, pushing my knee to the limit, fueled by a mixture of spite and a desire for redemption. I had to learn how to manage my own money, how to read a balance sheet, and how to spot a leech from a mile away. It was a brutal education, but it was necessary. I realized that my wealth had made me soft and vulnerable. I had let my ego take the wheel, and it almost drove me off a cliff. But as the swelling in my knee went down, my focus went up. I wasn't just training to play again. I was training to be a man who could never be played again. I started reaching out to the few people I had pushed away, the honest accountants, the agents who actually cared, and I apologized. I took accountability for my own role in the disaster. I was the one who signed the papers. I was the one who ignored the red flags. owning that was the only way I could move forward. I started studying the league's collective bargaining agreement. I started attending financial literacy seminars for rookies. I became a student of the game, both on and off the court. I realized that the golden boy had died in that hospital bed, and who was left was a survivor. In the end, I lost about $30 million. I moved into this tiny apartment and spent 2 years in grueling physical therapy. Marcus disappeared, probably living off whatever scraps he managed to hide. And Vanessa married some older executive a few months later. But here's the thing. I'm not the same kid I was. I'm healthy again. I just signed a league minimum contract with a small market team. It's not 50 million, but it's honest, and this time, I'm the only one with the keys to the kingdom. I learned that the people who tell you we all made it are often the ones who didn't put in the work, but want all the reward. I lost the millions, but I found my spine. If you ever find yourself coming into money or success, watch your back, because even the people who rebounded for you in the gym might be looking for a way to steal the ball when you aren't looking. I'm sharing this because I want people to know that rock bottom isn't the end. It's just a different starting line. My comeback isn't about the money anymore. It's about the game and the respect I have for myself now. I've realized that true wealth isn't what's in your bank account, but who you are when that account hits zero. I look at my mom now, and she's still in that house. I managed to save that one asset for her. She doesn't know the full extent of the betrayal, and she doesn't need to. She just sees her son working hard and playing the game he loves. That's enough for me. I'm building back, dollar by dollar, and this time the foundation is solid. If you are on my side through this story and you think I handled that confrontation the right way, please hit the like button. It helps get this warning out to other people who might be in similar situations. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about the reality behind the glamour. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Did Marcus and Vanessa get off too easy? Or is my comeback the ultimate revenge? I'll see you all in the next story.